My brother laughed before the lawyer even finished the sentence. And that laugh is the sound I still hear when I close my eyes. For 4 years, I had been the one driving my mother to chemotherapy on Tuesday mornings before my first shift at the hospital. My brother had been the one calling from his car between meetings, asking how she was doing in a voice that already sounded like he was somewhere else. So when the will named him the sole heir to our father's hardware store chain, 3 locations across the county, worth close to $2 million, and left me nothing but our mother's old bungalow on Maple Hollow Road, he didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Because if I don't, you won't understand why his laugh in that office didn't break me the way he wanted it to. My father built Doyle Hardware from a single rented storefront in 1987. By the time I was in middle school, there were 3 stores, a small fleet of delivery trucks, and a reputation in our town that meant something. People drove 20 minutes out of their way just to buy a bag of nails from the Doyle place. Because my dad would talk you through your project for free if you let him. My older brother started working the register there this summer. He turned 16, and he never really left. College, then business school, then straight back into the company, climbing from assistant manager to regional operations, to, eventually, the person everyone assumed would inherit the whole thing. I went a different direction. I became a nurse. Pediatric oncology, specifically, which is its own kind of education in watching families fall apart and put themselves back together. Nobody in my family ever said it out loud, but the assumption sat in every room like furniture. My brother was the business mind, the successor, the one who understood money. I was the soft one, the caretaker, the one who'd always land on her feet somehow. Because nurses are like that, aren't they? Endlessly capable of absorbing other people's pain and asking for nothing back. That assumption became a kind of prophecy when my mother got sick. It started with fatigue she blamed on getting older, then a cough that wouldn't quit. And then, on a Tuesday in March, a diagnosis that turned our entire family's center of gravity. Stage 3 lung cancer. She was 61. My father had passed 6 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, so it was just the 3 of us left to figure out how to survive this. Me, my brother, and a woman who had spent her whole life taking care of other people and had no idea how to let someone take care of her. I won't pretend my brother did nothing. He paid for things. He wrote checks for her medical bills without blinking, transferred money for a wig when she lost her hair, covered a specialist appointment our insurance wouldn't touch. I want to be fair about that, because fairness matters to me, even now. Money was never the thing my brother withheld. Time was. I moved back into my mother's house 8 months after her diagnosis, when it became clear she couldn't manage the stairs, the medications, the appointments, and the loneliness all on her own. I kept my nursing job, but I shifted to night shifts so I could be home during the day when she needed help most. Getting to the bathroom, keeping food down, simply not being alone with her own fear at 3 in the afternoon when the house got quiet and the thoughts got loud. I learned to read her blood counts before the doctor explained them. I learned which nausea medication actually worked for her and which one the pharmacy kept trying to substitute. I learned to recognize, in the particular way she went still, when she was in more pain than she was telling anyone. My brother visited on Sundays, usually for under an hour, usually with his phone in his hand. He'd kiss her forehead, ask the doctor's name like he was going to follow up on something, and then talk about the business. A new location they were scouting, a supplier issue, a regional manager who wasn't pulling his weight. My mother would light up during those visits in a way she never quite did with me, and for a long time that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself caregiving wasn't a competition for who got remembered fondly. I told myself a lot of things during those 2 years that I don't fully believe anymore. There was a night. I think about this night more than almost any other memory from that time, when my mother's fever spiked past 103 and I couldn't get it to break. I called my brother at 11 at night, panicking, asking if he could come help me get her to the ER because my car wouldn't start, and I didn't want to call an ambulance and frighten her more than necessaries. He said he had an early flight to Chicago for a supplier conference and couldn't risk being up all night. I called a rideshare instead. I sat in the back seat of a stranger's car holding my mother's hand while she shook against me, apologizing for the inconvenience of being sick. She survived that night. She didn't survive the cancer. She passed away on a rainy Thursday in October, in the bungalow, in the bedroom she'd shared with my father for 30 years, with me holding one hand and a hospice nurse holding the other. My brother arrived 40 minutes after she was gone. He'd been on his way, he said. Traffic on the interstate. I'm not telling you this to make him sound like a monster, because he isn't one, not really. He's just a man who built his whole identity around being the responsible one, the successful one. The one who showed up in the ways that were visible and provable, invoices, transfers, business cards. And somewhere along the way, he convinced himself that counted as everything. The funeral was the kind of event where half the county showed up, because everyone in our town had a story about something my parents had done for them. People kept telling my brother how proud our mother must have been of everything he'd built. Nobody said much to me at all, beyond a quiet, "I'm sorry for your loss," and a hand on my shoulder. I understood it. There's no line item for drove her to 41 appointments that people know how to compliment you on. 3 weeks after the funeral, we were called to a law office downtown to hear the reading of the will. I remember the receptionist offered us coffee, and I remember declining because my hands were already shaking enough. The lawyer's name was Mr. Castellano, an older man with reading glasses perched low on his nose, and the unhurried cadence of someone who has delivered both wonderful and devastating news in this exact room more times than he could count. He opened a folder, cleared his throat, and began. Your mother's estate has been organized according to her explicit wishes, he said. I want to walk through this carefully, so please bear with me. My brother sat up straighter. I noticed that. I noticed how he leaned slightly forward, the way you do when you already expect good news, and you're just waiting for the formal confirmation of it. Mr. Castellano continued. Doyle Hardware, including all 3 retail locations, the delivery fleet, and full operational control, is to pass entirely to her son. My brother exhaled something between a laugh and a sigh of relief. A couple of distant cousins in the back row nodded. Like this was simply the natural order of the universe being confirmed. The residential property at Maple Hollow Road, the lawyer went on, including the house and the surrounding 2 acres, is to pass entirely to her daughter. That was it. That was the whole division, on paper. A multi-location hardware business worth, by even conservative estimates, well over $1.5 million, against a 40-year-old 3-bedroom house that still had the same kitchen linoleum from 1994. My brother didn't even wait for the room to fully process it. He let out a short laugh, sharp, almost startled, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, well, I guess that settles who actually knew how to run something. A cousin made a small, uncomfortable sound. Nobody corrected him. He turned toward me, and I watched something shift behind his eyes, something that had clearly been sitting there for a long time, waiting for permission to come out. You spent 2 years playing nurse for free, he said, and you walk away with a house that needs a new roof. I spent that same time building something that's actually worth something. He shook his head, almost fond, almost pitying. Should have asked Mom to put you on payroll while you were at it. The room went quiet in that specific way. A room goes quiet when everyone is uncomfortable, but no one wants to be the one to say so. I felt my face go hot. I felt 20 different responses rise up in my throat and die there. Because what was the point? What was the point of explaining, in that room, to that man, that I hadn't been doing it for a paycheck, that I hadn't been doing it for a will, that I'd been doing it because she was my mother and she was scared and somebody needed to hold her hand at 3 in the morning, and it turned out that the somebody was always going to be me. Mr. Castellano, to his credit, didn't rush past the moment. He let it sit for a beat, watching my brother with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he closed the folder in front of him. "Before we conclude," he said, "there is one more matter your mother asked me to address. She was very specific that this be discussed only after the primary distribution had been read aloud, and not before." Every head in the room turned toward him. My brother's smile didn't fully disappear, but something flickered behind it. A small crack of uncertainty he tried to cover by leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, performing confidence for an audience he could no longer be entirely sure of. "What else could there possibly be?" he said, with a half-laugh. "Her good china?" A couple of people chuckled nervously. Mr. Castellano did not. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a second folder, this one thinner, the edges of the paper inside slightly worn, like it had been handled, folded and unfolded, many times before it ever reached this office. "Your mother wrote a letter," he said. "She asked that it be read in full, in this room, in front of both of you." Something in my chest tightened. My mother was not a woman who wrote letters. She communicated through casseroles and folded laundry, and the particular way she'd squeeze your hand twice, instead of once when she meant something extra. If she had taken the time to write something down, on paper, to be read aloud after she was gone, it meant something. It meant something big. Mr. Castellano unfolded the pages carefully. "My dearest children," he began, and I heard my own breath catch at the sound of those words in a stranger's voice. "If you are hearing this letter, I am no longer with you, and I imagine you're both sitting in Mr. Castellano's office, probably in those uncomfortable leather chairs I always complained about whenever your father had business there." A small, startled laugh broke out of me before I could stop it. That was so exactly her. The specificity of it, that I felt her in the room with us for just a second. I want to say, before anything else, that I am proud of both of my children, and I need you to actually believe that, not just hear it as something parents are supposed to say. My brother shifted in his seat. "To my son, you built something real. You took your father's vision, and you grew it further than even he imagined. And you did that through real work, real sacrifice, real years of showing up at 5 in the morning, to open the store and staying until close to make payroll. That matters. I am not pretending it doesn't matter." My brother's chin lifted slightly. I watched some of the tension drain out of his shoulders. "But," the lawyer continued, reading my mother's words, "I have watched both of my children for the past 2 years, and I need to say something that I never found the courage to say to your face while I was alive. Because I did not want either of you to feel I was choosing sides while I still needed you both." The room went very still. For 2 years, one of you built a business, and one of you sat beside me at 3 in the morning when I was too sick and too scared to be alone, and never once made me feel like a burden for needing you. One of you sent money, and one of you sent yourself, every single day, with no expectation of anything in return, not even gratitude, because she never once asked me what she would get for any of it. She only ever asked if I needed anything. I felt the tears arrive before I even registered I was crying. My brother's eyes were fixed on the table in front of him, his jaw working. "That is not a small thing," the letter continued. "That is, in fact, the largest thing a person can give another person, and I will not pretend on my way out of this world that it counts for less than a balance sheet." Mr. Castellano turned the page. "Which is why," he read, "I made a decision 6 years ago that neither of you know about, and I am only revealing it now." The room shifted. My brother sat forward again, all pretense of disinterest gone. "What decision?" he asked, his voice tighter than before. Mr. Castellano set down the letter and reached for a different document. This one, in a plain manila folder he'd had, sitting beneath the others the entire time, like a card he'd been holding back on purpose. 6 years ago, he explained, looking at both of us now. "Your mother, using funds she had quietly saved over nearly 2 decades, money your father never fully knew about, separate from the business, separate from any joint accounts, purchased a piece of undeveloped land approximately 11 miles north of town. 42 acres, along the ridge near the county line. I blinked. I had genuinely never heard of this. My brother's confusion looked equally real. What land? My brother asked. Mom never mentioned owning land. She asked me to keep it confidential until this exact moment, Mr. Castellano said. She was, in her words, tired of watching money explain who got loved more. He let that statement sit in the room for a moment before continuing. 8 months ago, before her diagnosis worsened, your mother was approached by a solar energy development company. They are in the process of acquiring long-term land leases throughout this region for a utility-scale solar farm project, and the ridge property she purchased sits in exactly the corridor they need. He slid a folded document across the table. This is the preliminary lease offer they extended to her. I should note it expired upon her death and would need to be renegotiated, but the appraisal attached to it is current and verified. My brother reached for the paper with visibly unsteady hands. I watched the color shift in his face as he read it. That's not possible, he said quietly. It's accurate, Mr. Castellano said. The land, combined with the projected 25-year lease value of the solar agreement, is currently appraised at just under $2.3 million. Your mother's will specifies that this property, along with all associated lease rights, passes entirely to her daughter, in addition to the house. The room actually gasped. I heard it happen. An audible intake of breath from the cousins in the back row, from an aunt near the window who had been quietly judging me all afternoon for only getting the house. My brother stared at the appraisal like it might rearrange itself into different numbers if he looked hard enough. That's worth more than the business, he said, almost to himself. There is one more piece of information your mother wanted disclosed today, Mr. Castellano said. And something in his tone made my stomach drop again. Differently this time. He pulled out a final set of papers. Financial statements. The kind with columns I recognized from years of watching my brother talk about the business at family dinners. Doyle Hardware currently carries approximately $400,000 in expansion debt from the 4th location your brother opened 18 months ago, along with several multi-year supplier contracts, with penalty clauses for early termination and a commercial lease renewal coming up next year at a significantly increased rate. He looked directly at my brother. The business is profitable on paper, but it is also carrying real, substantial financial risk. Risk your mother was aware of, because she still held a minority advisory role on the company's books, even after stepping back from daily operations. My brother's face had gone pale. I would have told her that was manageable, he said. I have a plan for the debt. I'm sure you do, Mr. Castellano said, not unkindly. I'm only relaying what your mother wanted, said aloud in this room. He returned to the letter and read my mother's final lines. If my daughter is hearing this, I want her to know something I should have told her while I was alive. The world will always notice the people who build loud, visible things. It rarely notices the people who hold the quiet things together. I noticed. I noticed every single day, even when I was too sick and too proud to say it. You did not do this for money. And I am not giving you this land because I think it makes up for what I never said. I am giving it to you because you have spent your whole life valuing people over things, and I wanted for once, for the world to reward, that the way it deserves to be rewarded. My throat had closed so completely I couldn't have spoken even if I'd wanted to. To my son, the letter continued. Gentler now. Please do not hear this as a punishment. You did not fail me. But I need you to understand that the years ahead will be easier for you if you learn now, while I can still say it through this letter, that the people who show up quietly are not lesser than the people who show up loudly. I love you both equally. I am simply done letting only one of you be seen. Mr. Castellano folded the letter closed. Nobody spoke for a long moment. My brother sat with the appraisal still in his hands, staring at nothing in particular. The confident posture from 20 minutes earlier completely gone, replaced by something smaller, something I hadn't seen on him. Since he was a teenager getting caught in a lie he couldn't talk his way out of. Eventually, he looked up at me. I braced myself for another comment, another deflection, the kind of joke he might make to recover the room. Instead, he just said, quietly, "I didn't know you sat with her at 3 in the morning." "You weren't there to know," I said. It wasn't meant as a knife. It was just the truth, and I think, for the first time, he actually let it land as one. "I should have been," he said. We didn't hug. We didn't have some movie-perfect reconciliation in that office, with everyone watching and the lawyer pretending not to listen. That's not how real families work, and I won't pretend it happened that way for the sake of a tidier ending. What happened was smaller and, I think, more honest. He sat there, quiet, holding the weight of every Sunday visit he'd cut short, every late night he hadn't shown up for, every joke he'd made 20 minutes earlier that he now clearly wished he could take back. As people slowly filed out of the office, murmuring to each other, my aunt who'd judged me earlier touched my arm and said, "I'm sorry, honey. I didn't know." And I just nodded, because there wasn't really an answer for that one either. It's been a little over a year now. My brother and I talk more than we used to, though it's still not easy, and I don't think it ever fully will be. Not because of the inheritance, but because some things, once seen clearly, can't be unseen. And we're both still learning how to be in a room, together with that knowledge sitting between us. He sold the 4th location to manage the debt, and, to his credit, he asked me for advice before he did it. The first time in his adult life, he'd ever asked me for advice about anything involving money. I told him I thought it was the right call. He actually listened. I still live in the bungalow on Maple Hollow Road. I haven't touched the solar lease money yet. Not really. Beyond fixing the roof my brother mocked me for inheriting. Some nights I sit on the back porch and think about my mother sitting at her kitchen table, alone, writing that letter in secret, planning a quiet, devastating piece of justice she never lived to see delivered. I think about how she spent the last years of her life being cared for by one child and impressed by the other, and how, in the end, she found a way to make sure both of those truths were finally spoken out loud, in the same room, at the same time. I didn't inherit the business. I didn't inherit the louder version of success. Everyone in that room had expected me to walk away without. I inherited the truth about what actually mattered to her. And it turns out that was worth more than anyone in that room, including me, until that afternoon, had ever imagined.